Hi, and welcome to yet another edition of Google Truth or Lies. My name is Josh Bashinsky. I'll be your host for today. Today I'll give you some free SEO advice on the Google Webmaster Guidelines, the general guidelines. We're going to analyze each of those guidelines and check to see whether they are truth or lie. This Truth or Lies series is put out by Underground SEO University. If you want to learn how we've discovered the truth of these Google claims, email me at joshbashinsky@gmail.com, and I'll have a special discount for you to join Underground SEO University, and you can get on the action too and find out how to catapult your site and your pages to top 1 rankings using this little thing we call science. So let's take a look at the Google Webmaster Guidelines, the general guidelines, and give you some free SEO advice and free SEO tips on whether those are truth or lies and what you should do there. Okay, so I'm looking at the Advanced SEO general guidelines here, and they're very important to pay attention to. We've been going over the beginner SEO and the advanced SEO, Google Search Central Webmaster Guidelines, and so here is the general guidelines, and we're going to go through them one at a time to see if they are true or lie. So the first thing they say is keep a simple URL structure. A site's URL structure should be as simple as possible, they claim. For example, a simple descriptive URL, they claim, is better than a complex undescriptive URL. Is that true? Does Google prefer, and will you rank better? It doesn't matter what Google prefers. Let's just clarify something. It doesn't matter what Google prefers. The question is, will you rank better if you follow these suggestions and guidelines? And the answer is, will you rank better if you have a simple URL structure as opposed to that big long one, this one here, where it's super long and non-descriptive? The answer is a qualified bing, yes. However, you have to be very, very careful as to what you put in here. A simple structure is definitely better than this, but if you put the wrong keywords in here, you can really, really get into some trouble. So it's a qualified yes, a partial yes, that this is truth. You do want a simple descriptive URL, but they should put something on the end here, and make sure you have done scientific testing to find out what the right keywords are to put in here, and then put them and only them in here, or you will be in trouble. So that's the extra stuff that they're leaving out that makes this a very deceptive general guideline. Okay, let's look at the next one. So the next one here, they say, is consider using punctuation in your URLs. So this is very interesting. They claim it helps users and search engines identify concepts in the URL easier. Interesting. Tell me more, Google. So then they say recommended keywords in URLs separated with punctuation. Okay, punctuation. What kind of punctuation, Google? They're literally telling you to put keywords in your URL, so that's interesting. And I guess if you're trying to rank for green dress, here's where you're supposed to put green dress, and you're supposed to separate it with a dash, as opposed to, for example, doing this. So the question is the recommended method here of putting keywords in the URL separated with punctuation, is this truly going to help you rank? The answer is false. A big false. This is actually the wrong way to do it for 2 reasons. One, if you're not careful of the keywords you put in here, like I said above here, you are going to run into over-optimization problems. And 2, it is false. We have scientifically tested whether the dash here is a good idea, and it is not. This, all things being equal, would rank better than this. So that is an old recommendation from Google and not in line with their current artificial intelligence, and or Google are just flat, straight liars. Wah, 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 wah. Let's test the next claim. Also, they recommend you use hyphens as opposed to underscores. Is this true? Survey says, false. Don't use either. Don't use hyphens or underscores in your URLs. We've scientifically tested this, and this will not help you rank. All right, the next thing they talk about are overly complicated URLs that have URL parameters in them. This is a URL parameter. Anything that starts with a question mark and goes on from there is a URL parameter. And they claim that you should not have URL parameters. You should be careful about the problematic parameters in the URL, sorting parameters and things like that, that does not help Google, and it can make it confusing for Google to index these and to rank these. And is that true? The answer is bing, yes, that's definitely true. Avoid URL parameters like this in your URLs. You definitely want to lean more towards a simple URL structure for sure. All right, the next suggestion that Google is making has to do with outbound links. They ask that you qualify your outbound links to Google. And what do they mean by that? Well, they want you to use the rel attribute in the anchor tag. This is the anchor tag here. and they want you to use the rel attribute and the anchor tag to tell them what kind of link it is. And why do they want this? They want you to do this so they can use machine learning for all the dupes who follow this to learn automatically what is a sponsored link, that is to say an advertisement, what is user-generated content, and what they should not pass any value to in terms of their PageRank algorithm, etc., etc., etc. You can have multiple values in there. So what will happen if you use these? Will this help you in any way? Will this help you rank? Is this going to boost you up? We've tested this, and the answer is no. This is not going to help you rank in any way. This is helping Google. This is not helping you. And it's not even helping you on your site or anything like that. It's not going to really do anything to help you. And it's not going to get you out of any kind of penalty either. If Google thinks you're doing nasty or untoward spammy things, don't think that following the recommendation here, putting sponsored or UGC in your content is going to make it any better or any easier for you. So whether you should qualify your outbound links to Google, the answer is no. It's false that this will help you in any way, shape, or form. All right, what about intrusive interstitials and dialogues? What is an interstitial? Interstitial or a dialogue is a little thing that pops up like this that covers the content and makes the user interact with it in some way before they can get to the page. And Google here claims they want you to create unintrusive dialogues. They would rather use banners instead of interstitials. They'd rather, for example, something like this happen as opposed to something that completely blocks the page. So instead of interstitials, use banners. Banners ensure that users and search engines can get to the content as soon as they land on the page. Also, the interstitial might block the content somehow and make it hard for the Googlebot to crawl that information. So unless it's a mandatory interstitial where you absolutely need to do that, and I would follow these guidelines for that, the question is, should you obey this recommendation from Google and create unintrusive dialogues, more like a banner than an interstitial? Is that true or lie? The answer is, bing, true. It's definitely true. Interstitials are not good for ranking. They will demote you. There's various algorithms that it could end up in a negative ranking effect for your page. And it's definitely not nice for the user. It's making them interact one time. And also it's going to damage your CRO. You definitely don't want your CRO to be reduced, your conversion rate optimization. So this is definitely not a good idea to have interstitial like this. The next suggestion from Google is to avoid creating duplicate content. Duplicate content is any block of text which is substantively similar to any other block of text. It has to be more than 50% of your page. If you just have 30 or 40% duplicated, you probably would be fine. And you can also put other blocks in between, and then that's another way to avoid duplication. To my knowledge, and in our scientific testing, Google has an older and somewhat antiquated way of determining whether you have duplicate content by using a mathematical formula of adding up the sum totality of your content and seeing if it comes out mathematically to the same kind of equation. It's a very, very basic way of talking about it, but it's more or less true. So they say, avoid making it, please. Discussion forums are fine. They say an online store that has multiple distinct URLs. Here's the thing, is that if your server makes multiple URLs for the same content, that's considered duplicate content across multiple pages. So the question is, do you want to avoid making duplicate content? Is this a Google truth? Is this going to help you rank if you avoid duplicate content and you have a new, unique content on your site and to make sure every page is unique? The answer is, bing, yes. You definitely want to have unique content. You definitely want to avoid duplicate content. There's no such thing as a duplicate content penalty. But if Google determines that parts of your site are duplicated or a lot of your site is duplicated, at a certain threshold, your entire site will have ranking difficulties. It'll have difficulties being indexed. If it can't be indexed, it can't be ranked. And we've scientifically tested all of this. And so you definitely don't want to have spammy content or duplicate content. You definitely don't want to have errors in Search Console where they're having trouble and they're telling you there's a lot of duplicated content. All of that is going to end up being bad for your rankings. And you want to avoid all those things for sure. Okay, those have been the general guidelines from the advanced SEO section of the Webmaster Guidelines in Google Search Central. Check in with our next episode where we'll go through the next set of guidelines to see if they are Google truth or lies. And if you're interested in the Underground SEO University, where we scientifically test all these claims to find the absolute best ranking factors to catapult your site to #1 guaranteed, email me at joshbashinsky@gmail.com.